Jack was tired, his boots covered in dust from walking around the massive scrapyard. The place stretched for miles, filled with rusting metal, broken ships, and forgotten cargo. It was the perfect place for a man like him. Someone who couldn't afford new equipment, but still needed parts for his mining business. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and stopped in front of an old mining container. It was big, rusty, and covered in dents, but it looked sturdy. A faded serial number was painted on the side, barely readable. The seller, an old man with greasy hands, scratched his head. "This one?" The old man asked. "Nobody's touched it in years. Came from an abandoned station. Probably empty." Jack shrugged. "How much?" 500 credits. Jack frowned. It was more than he wanted to spend, but he needed a good container. He looked around at the other junk. Most of it was useless. This one, at least, was solid. 300, Jack said. The old man laughed. 450. 350, Jack countered. The old man sighed. Fine. 350. But no refunds. Jack transferred the credits, and the deal was done. With the help of a small loading drone, he moved the heavy container onto his ship, the Rust Hopper, a beat-up mining ship, barely held together with repairs. Once he was back in space, Jack set the ship on autopilot toward his asteroid base. Then he went to check his purchase. The container's doors were rusted shut, so he grabbed a crowbar and forced them open. As soon as the doors creaked apart, cold air rushed out. Jack shivered. Inside, it was dark, with only a few flickering emergency lights. "What the?" he muttered. The container wasn't empty. At the center of the space was a strange pod, covered in thick glass and metal plating. The pod was connected to a dying power source, blinking weakly. Frost covered the edges of the glass. Jack stepped closer, his heart pounding. Inside the pod, a woman lay motionless. But she wasn't human. Her skin had a soft blue tint. Her hair was silver, flowing around her shoulders. Her features were delicate, almost glowing in the dim light. She wore a strange, form-fitting suit, covered in alien symbols. Jack took a step back, his mind racing. An alien, a real, living alien. He had heard stories about alien ruins and artifacts found in deep space, but nothing like this. This was a living being, not a piece of old technology. Jack's first thought was to call someone, maybe a scientist or the authorities. But something about that idea felt wrong. If he reported this, they might take her away. They might lock her in a lab, study her, maybe worse. He looked at the pod again. The lights were fading, and the frost was melting fast. The power was running out. "She's dying," Jack whispered. He didn't know why, but he couldn't just walk away. He searched the pod's control panel. Most of the text was in an unknown language, but there were universal symbols, power levels, temperature control, and a large red button with a triangle. Jack hesitated for a second, then took a deep breath. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, and pressed the button. A loud hissing sound filled the container as steam rushed out of the pod. The lights flashed, and the glass slowly lifted. Jack took a step back, heart pounding. The alien woman gasped, her body jerking as if waking from a nightmare. Her eyes snapped open, bright silver, like starlight. She coughed, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then she turned her head and looked straight at Jack. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncertain. Jack raised his hand slowly. "Hey, you're okay." The alien woman blinked, then tried to sit up. But she was weak, her arms shaking. She opened her mouth, trying to speak, but her voice was hoarse. Jack hurried forward. "Hold on. Don't try to move too fast." She flinched at first, but didn't pull away. Instead, her eyes searched his face as if trying to understand. Jack wasn't sure what to do next. He had just bought a container, expecting some old mining gear. Instead, he had found a living alien, trapped in a forgotten pod. One thing was clear. His life was never going to be the same again. The alien woman's breathing was unsteady. Her silver eyes flickered with confusion, fear, and exhaustion. Jack could see that she was weak, her body trembling as she tried to sit up in the pod. Jack took a slow step closer, keeping his hands up in a non-threatening gesture. "Hey, easy," he said, his voice calm. "You just woke up from whatever this is. Don't rush." The alien woman's gaze locked onto him. She opened her mouth, but her voice came out as a soft whisper, words in an unknown language. Jack frowned. "I don't understand." The woman tried again, her voice stronger this time, but still speaking in her own language. Jack could hear emotion behind her words, fear, confusion, maybe even relief. But he had no idea what she was saying. He glanced at the pod's control panel, hoping for some kind of translation system. Nothing. The controls were still blinking weakly, the power nearly gone. Whatever technology had kept her alive for so long was failing. Jack sighed. "Great. First real alien I meet, and I don't even know how to talk to her." He tapped his wrist communicator, activating his ship's eye assistant. "Rusty, can you scan the language and translate?" The AI's voice crackled through the speaker. "Insufficient data. Need more speech samples to process." Jack groaned. "Figures." The alien woman tilted her head slightly, watching the interaction. She looked at Jack's communicator, then back at his face. Her silver eyes narrowed slightly as if trying to understand him, just as much as he was trying to understand her. She lifted a shaky hand and touched her chest. "Aura." Jack blinked. "Aura." She nodded. Jack pointed at her. "That's your name." "Aura," she repeated, her voice steadier now. Jack exhaled, relieved. "Okay, that's a start." He tapped his own chest. "Jack." Aura's lips moved slightly, trying to repeat the word. "Key." Jack grinned. Close enough. Now that they had some way to communicate, Jack focused on the bigger problem. What to do next? Aura was clearly not from any known alien species. If she was, Earth scientists would have mentioned something about silver-eyed, blue-skinned people before. So either she was from a lost civilization, or she was someone nobody was supposed to find. The second option made Jack uneasy. He looked at the pod's structure, noticing strange markings on the sides. They weren't just decorations. They looked like warnings, symbols of danger, of something meant to be hidden. Jack swallowed hard. "What were you running from, Aura?" She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Her expression darkened. She looked away, staring at the walls of the mining container, as if remembering something terrible. Then she grabbed Jack's arm suddenly. Jack stiffened, startled by the unexpected touch. Aura's grip was weak, but her fingers trembled as she pointed toward the open door of the container, toward the stars beyond the ship's window. Her voice was urgent now. She spoke in her language again, repeating the same phrase. The same warning. Jack had no idea what she was saying, but the way she kept looking at the stars made his gut twist. It was as if she was saying, "They will come." A sudden alarm blared inside the ship. Jack's heart jumped. He rushed to his control panel, checking the readings. His stomach dropped when he saw the warning message. "Unknown signal. DKTCTE nearby. Possible. Incoming OGCT." Jack's hands tightened into fists. He knew what this meant. The pod had been sending out a signal ever since he powered it up. And now someone had noticed. Jack turned back to Aura. "Is someone looking for you?" Aura's eyes were full of fear, but she nodded. Jack cursed under his breath. This was bad. Really bad. If some alien race had been hunting her, they probably weren't the friendly kind. And now, because of him, they might be heading straight for his ship. He pulled up the ship's radar. A small red dot blinked on the screen. It wasn't moving fast yet, but it was too close for comfort. Jack clenched his jaw. "Rusty, scan the object." Scanning. Object is a small probe. No weapons detected. Jack exhaled. A probe. That was both good and bad. Good, because it wasn't a warship. Bad, because if it was a scout, whoever sent it would know they found something. He turned to Aura. We need to get out of here. Fast. Aura seemed to understand his urgency. She nodded weakly. Jack rushed to the pilot's seat, firing up the rust hopper's engines. The ship rumbled as it prepared to move. He took one last look at the red dot on his screen. It wasn't chasing him yet, but he knew better than to wait. With a sharp pull of the controls, Jack shot the ship forward, away from the probe and into the deep void of space. He didn't know who was out there. He didn't know what they wanted with Aura. But one thing was clear. He had just stepped into something much bigger than he'd ever expected. And now, there was no turning back. Jack gripped the ship's controls tightly, his heart pounding as the rust hopper shot through space. The engine hummed loudly, pushing the small mining ship as fast as it could go. Behind him, the mysterious probe still floated in the darkness, unmoving. But Jack knew better than to feel safe. If it had sent a signal, others would come soon. He glanced at the alien woman, Aura. She was seated in the co-pilot's chair now, watching the screens with wide silver eyes. Her breathing was still weak, but she was awake, fully aware of the danger they were in. Jack tapped the ship's eye. Rusty, any sign of pursuit? No enemy ships detected yet, Rusty responded. But the probe is still active. Possible communication signal sent. Jack exhaled sharply. Not good. He turned to Aura. Who's looking for you? Aura stared at him, her expression serious, but she didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't understand his words. Jack rubbed his forehead, frustrated. Great. We need to fix this language problem fast. He pulled out a translation device, a small portable scanner that could learn languages over time. It was mostly used for trading with off-world colonies, but Jack hoped it would work for this. He activated it and pointed to himself. Jack. Aura nodded. Jack. He pointed to her. Aura. She nodded again. Aura. Jack pointed at the screen, where the red blinking dot of the probe was still visible. Enemy. Aura's silver eyes darkened. She hesitated for a second, then slowly nodded. Jack sighed. That confirmed it. Whoever sent that probe was after her. Rusty, set course for the asteroid belt, Jack ordered. Warning. Asteroid belt is a dangerous navigation zone, Rusty replied. I know, Jack muttered. But if they send ships, I need somewhere to hide. The rust hopper changed direction, heading toward the dense field of floating rocks ahead. The asteroid belt was chaotic, unpredictable, and risky for small ships like his, but it was also a perfect place to lose a tail. Jack tightened his grip on the controls as they entered the field. Large chunks of rock drifted slowly around them, some the size of mountains, others as small as pebbles. The ship's autopilot beeped in warning, but Jack ignored it. He had flown through this place before. He could handle it. Aura, however, looked nervous. Her fingers gripped the edge of her seat as the ship weaved between the giant floating rocks. Jack noticed and gave her a reassuring smile. Relax. I got this. Aura didn't understand the words, but when she looked at Jack's calm expression, she seemed to trust him. Suddenly, Rusty's alarm blared. Warning. Multiple ships detected, incoming at high speed. Jack's stomach dropped. They were already here. He checked the radar. 4 small fighter ships had just entered the asteroid belt. Dark, sharp-looking vessels that moved like predators hunting prey. They're fast, Jack muttered, scanning the enemy ships. Too fast for normal pirates. Aura leaned forward, staring at the screen. When she saw the ships, her face went pale. She whispered something in her own language, her voice filled with fear. Jack didn't need a translator to understand. She knew who they were. The enemy ships split into formation, trying to surround the rust hopper. Jack gritted his teeth and pushed the engines harder, weaving through the floating rocks. They're trying to box us in, Jack growled. Rusty, give me all available power to the thrusters. Warning: high-speed maneuvering in an asteroid field is extremely dangerous. Jack smirked. I like danger. The ship lurched forward, dodging between asteroids as the enemy fighters closed in. A bright blue energy blast shot past the cockpit, barely missing them. Aura gasped, gripping the seat tightly. Jack cursed. They're not trying to capture us. They're trying to destroy us. More energy blasts followed, but Jack twisted the controls, making the rust hopper dive under a massive asteroid. The enemy ships followed, keeping close. Jack's eyes darted around, searching for a way out. Then he saw it, a narrow gap between two giant asteroids, just wide enough for his ship. A crazy idea formed in his mind. I hope you trust me, Aura, he muttered, steering straight toward the gap. Aura's eyes widened as she realized what he was about to do. She shook her head, her body tense. Jack just grinned. Hold on tight. The ship raced forward, the asteroids closing in fast. Jack kept his hand steady, ignoring the alarms screaming at him. The moment the rust hopper slipped through the gap, Jack twisted the ship sideways, barely squeezing through the tight space. One of the enemy ships followed, but was too slow. There was a loud crash as it slammed into the asteroid, breaking apart in an explosion. Aura gasped in shock, staring at Jack with wide eyes. Jack smirked. Told you I got this. The remaining 3 enemy ships hesitated for a second. That was Jack's chance. Rusty, activate the decoy system. Now. A small compartment under the rust hopper opened, releasing 3 glowing drones that mimicked the ship's heat signature. The enemy ships hesitated, unsure which target to chase. Jack took the opportunity. He dove the ship downward, behind a large spinning asteroid, breaking line of sight. Seconds passed. Then, silence. Jack checked the radar. The enemy ships had lost them. He exhaled heavily, finally relaxing. We're clear. For now. Aura stared at him, breathing fast. Then, to Jack's surprise, she smiled slightly. It was a small, tired smile, but Jack could tell it was a smile of gratitude. Jack smiled back. Guess we make a good team. Aura didn't understand the words, but she nodded. Jack leaned back in his seat, still catching his breath. He didn't know who those ships belonged to, but one thing was clear. This was far from over. They had escaped today, but whoever was hunting Aura wouldn't stop. And now Jack was involved too. He looked at the alien woman beside him and knew. His life had just changed forever. Jack exhaled, his hand still gripping the controls tightly. The rust hopper was now deep inside the asteroid belt, hidden between 2 giant floating rocks. The enemy ships were gone, at least for now. He turned to Aura. She was still breathing heavily, her silver eyes scanning the screens as if expecting another attack. Jack gave her a reassuring nod. We lost them. Aura looked at him, her expression still tense, but after a few seconds, she relaxed slightly. Jack leaned back in his chair. His heart was still racing from the chase. All right, he muttered, rubbing his forehead. Time to figure out what's really going on. He turned to his AI assistant, Rusty. Did we record anything from those ships? Any signals, markings, anything? Processing. Matching data. 1 match found. Jack raised an eyebrow. 1 match. From where? The markings on the enemy ships matched symbols found on the alien pod. Jack's stomach tightened. He glanced at Aura. She was watching him carefully, as if she already knew what Rusty had just said. Jack stood up and walked to the mining container where Aura's pod was still resting. The ice had melted completely now, and the strange alien symbols on the side were clearly visible. Jack had ignored them before, but now he knew they were important. Rusty scanned the symbols. Try to translate. The AI scanner flashed over the pod. The screen flickered for a few seconds before a rough translation appeared. Jack leaned forward, reading the words carefully. Warning: High priority subject. Dangerous knowledge. Transport under strict security. Do not interfere. Jack's blood ran cold. He turned back to Aura. You were a prisoner. Aura didn't understand his words, but she must have understood his tone. Her face hardened, and she looked away. Jack sighed. He could tell she wasn't happy about whatever was written on that pod. If she had been a prisoner, that meant those ships were more than just hunters. They were probably military or some powerful organization that wanted her locked away, or worse. Jack ran a hand through his hair. Great, just great. He looked at Aura again. She was watching him now, studying his face as if trying to guess his next move. Jack took a deep breath. You don't have to tell me everything, he said, knowing she wouldn't understand. But if those guys want you so badly, there must be a reason. Aura stayed silent for a moment. Then, slowly, she raised a hand and touched her forehead, as if remembering something. Then she pointed at the pod. Jack frowned. Something inside. Aura nodded. Jack grabbed his toolkit and carefully pried open a small panel on the side of the pod. Inside there was a hidden compartment. He reached in and pulled out a small metallic device, no bigger than his palm. It was shaped like a hexagon, with tiny glowing lines running across its surface. Jack held it up. This. Aura nodded again, her eyes filled with urgency. Jack turned the device over in his hands. All right. What does it do? Aura hesitated, then pressed her palm against the device. The lines began to glow brighter, and suddenly, a holographic image appeared above it. Jack's eyes widened as a map of the galaxy flickered into view. Strange symbols hovered around certain locations. Some of them blinked red, while others remained dim and silent. Jack stared at it, his mind racing. What is this? He whispered. Aura pointed at one of the red blinking symbols. Then she tapped her chest, as if saying, This is where I come from. Jack frowned. You're from here. She nodded. Jack's eyes moved to another red blinking point, this one closer to their current position. Is this where we need to go? He asked. Aura hesitated for a second, then nodded again. Jack rubbed his chin. He had no idea what this device was or why it seemed to contain secret locations across the galaxy. But he did know one thing. If those hunters wanted Aura so badly, it wasn't just because she was important. It was because of whatever was on this map. Jack sighed, placing the device carefully in his pocket. Rusty, he said, standing up. Plot a course for this location. Quietly. No signals. Acknowledged. Course plotted. Jack turned back to Aura. I don't know what I just got myself into, he admitted. But I have a feeling it's way bigger than I expected. Aura gave him a small, tired smile. Jack smirked. Well, no turning back now. He sat back in the pilot's chair and engaged the engines. As the rust hopper slipped out of the asteroid field and disappeared into the stars, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something far more dangerous than he ever imagined. And for the first time in his life, he was excited about it. The rust hopper moved through space, gliding between distant stars. Inside the cockpit, Jack sat at the controls, his eyes flicking between the holographic map and the ship's radar. He had set a quiet course toward the blinking red location on the map, but he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was following them. Behind him, Aura sat in the co-pilot's chair, her silver eyes studying the map projection carefully. The small glowing device rested in her hands, pulsing with faint blue light. Jack cleared his throat. So this thing. He pointed at the device. It's some kind of navigation tool, right? Aura looked at him, but didn't respond. Jack sighed. Right. Still don't understand each other. He leaned back, crossing his arms. But I do know one thing. Whoever was chasing you doesn't want us to find these locations. Aura's expression darkened. She tapped the red blinking dot nearest to them, then pointed at the map, saying something in her language. Jack raised an eyebrow. You want to go there? Aura nodded. Jack sighed. Fine. But if this is some secret alien war zone, I'm turning around. Aura gave a small smile, as if she understood his joking tone. Jack glanced at the ship's radar. So far, no enemy ships were following them. Maybe they had really escaped. BEEP, BEP. The alarm suddenly blared. Jack's stomach twisted. Oh, come on. He turned to the radar screen. A small object was closing in on their position. Fast. Rusty, what is that? Scanning. Object is a stealth drone. Possible tracking device. Jack's fingers tightened on the controls. They left a tracker on us. Aura frowned, staring at the radar. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the danger. Jack cursed under his breath. All right, let's lose it. He slammed the thrusters, sending the rust hopper into a sharp turn. The ship dove downward, twisting between asteroid debris floating nearby. The stealth drone followed, moving like a shadow, keeping up with every turn. Jack gritted his teeth. Smart little thing. Aura suddenly grabbed his arm. Jack turned to her. What? She pointed at the holographic map, then at a large asteroid field ahead. Jack followed her gaze. The asteroid field wasn't part of his planned course, but he understood her idea immediately. You want to hide in there? Aura nodded quickly. Jack hesitated for only a second before pushing the controls forward. All right, let's do it. The rust hopper shot into the asteroid field, weaving between massive floating rocks. The stealth drone followed, but it wasn't built for high-speed maneuvering. Jack grinned as he saw the drone struggling to avoid the obstacles. Now we have a chance. He flicked a switch. A small hatch on the back of the ship opened, releasing a decoy signal beacon. The drone, unable to react fast enough, turned toward the decoy, right before crashing into a spinning asteroid. Boom! The drone exploded into a bright flash, its pieces scattering into space. Jack laughed. Nice try. He turned to Aura. That was a good idea. Aura gave a small, proud smile. Jack leaned back, letting out a deep breath. All right, no more distractions. Let's get to that location. The arrival. After a few hours of flying, the rust hopper finally reached the red blinking location from the map. Jack frowned at the screen. Rusty. Confirm location. What exactly are we looking at? Confirmed. Location is an uncharted planet. Atmosphere is stable. No known records in the galactic database. Jack blinked. A hidden planet. Aura leaned forward, staring at the blue and green world appearing on the screen. Her expression softened, as if she recognized it. Jack studied her face. This is your home, isn't it? Aura nodded slowly. Jack let out a breath. All right, let's land. The rust hopper descended, breaking through the atmosphere. Below them, a dense jungle covered the planet, stretching as far as the eye could see. Waterfalls, rivers, and tall mountains painted a scene that looked untouched by civilization. Jack guided the ship toward a clearing, landing carefully between the thick trees. As the engines powered down, Aura stood up, looking eager to leave the ship. Jack raised an eyebrow. You in a hurry? Aura didn't respond. She pressed a button on her wrist. A small holographic image appeared above her palm. It showed a symbol, glowing faintly. Jack tilted his head. What is that? Aura didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the ship's exit, waiting for Jack to follow. Jack sighed, grabbing his blaster holster, just in case. All right. Let's see what's so special about this place. The ship's ramp lowered, and warm, fresh air rushed inside. The jungle outside hummed with life, filled with strange alien plants and sounds. Aura stepped forward, her boots touching the soft grass. She closed her eyes for a second, breathing deeply, as if remembering something. Jack followed, looking around. Looks peaceful enough. But his gut told him something was watching them. He turned back to Aura. All right, where to next? Aura lifted her holographic symbol, scanning the jungle. Suddenly, the device beeped, pointing toward a distant hill. Jack sighed. Let me guess. We're going there. Aura nodded firmly. Jack groaned. Of course, it's never the easy path. As they started walking, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this planet held secrets. He glanced at Aura, wondering, was this place really her home? Or was it something even more important? Jack followed Aura through the dense jungle, stepping over thick roots and pushing aside large leaves. The air smelled fresh, but there was a strange energy in the air, something that made Jack feel like they were not alone. The device in Aura's hand kept beeping softly, pointing toward the distant hill. She walked quickly, her silver eyes filled with determination. Jack sighed. You're really sure about this place, huh? Aura glanced at him, but didn't respond. Jack shook his head. Of course, no answer. Just a long hike through an alien jungle. As they walked, Jack noticed strange carvings on some of the trees, symbols similar to the ones on Aura's pod. He ran his fingers over one of the markings. Looks old. Real old. Aura stopped and stared at the carving for a moment. Then she touched it gently, almost respectfully, before continuing forward. Jack raised an eyebrow. Was this place really her home, or was it something even bigger? The entrance. After an hour of walking, they reached the base of the hill. A large rock formation stood in front of them, covered in moss and vines. The device in Aura's hand peeped louder. Jack crossed his arms. So, what now? Aura didn't hesitate. She placed her hand on the rock, right over a faded symbol. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, rumble. The rock shook, and a hidden stone door slowly slid open, revealing a dark tunnel leading underground. Jack took a step back. All right, that's new. Aura turned to him, her eyes filled with expectation. Jack sighed. Yeah, I'm coming. He grabbed a small flashlight from his belt and followed Aura inside. The forgotten place. The tunnel was long and quiet, the only sounds coming from their footsteps. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing faintly as they passed. Jack ran his fingers over one of the carvings. I've seen these before. On your pod. Aura nodded, confirming his thoughts. After a few minutes, the tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. Jack's eyes widened. Whoa! In the center of the chamber stood a large circular structure, glowing faintly. It looked like some kind of portal or ancient machine. Aura stepped forward, placing her hand on the surface of the structure. The symbols glowed brighter, responding to her touch. Jack stepped closer. All right, what is this thing? Aura didn't answer, but she looked at him, this time with sadness in her eyes. Jack frowned. What's wrong? Aura exhaled slowly, then pointed at the holographic map device. She tapped the red blinking symbols, then pointed at the portal-like machine. Jack's mind clicked the pieces together. These places on the map, they're not just locations. He looked at Aura. They're connected. Aura nodded. Jack took a deep breath. So this machine, it connects to other places. Another nod. Jack scratched his head. Okay, but why is this one important? Aura hesitated for a moment. Then, she pressed her palm against the machine's surface. A holographic image appeared in the air. Jack's eyes widened. The image showed a group of people. They looked like Aura. Same silver eyes, same graceful features. They were running, trying to escape something. Behind them, shadowy figures chased them. The image flickered, showing massive ships in the sky, firing beams of energy. Cities were destroyed, and the people vanished into the portals, just like the one in front of them. Jack's throat felt dry. This is history, isn't it? Aura's eyes darkened, and she nodded. Jack exhaled. Your people, they were attacked. Aura pointed at herself, then at the machine, and finally at the symbols on the walls. Jack understood. You weren't just a random prisoner in that pod. You were part of this, part of whatever happened here. Aura looked down, as if remembering something painful. Jack clenched his fists. And those guys who were chasing us. They knew. The realization hit him like a punch. She wasn't just important. She was one of the last survivors of a lost civilization. The warning. Jack turned back to the portal machine. Does it still work? Aura shook her head. She pointed at the device in her hand, then at the machine, then made an X shape with her fingers. Jack frowned. It's broken. Aura nodded. Jack sighed. Figures. Before he could say more, the device in Aura's hand beeped loudly. But this time, it wasn't scanning. Jack's heart jumped. That's not good, is it? Aura looked at the device, her expression turning serious. Jack glanced at the screen. The map was still displayed, but now, a red warning symbol flashed on the edge of the screen. Jack didn't need translation to understand what that meant. Someone's coming. Aura grabbed his arm and pointed toward the exit. Jack didn't argue. Yeah, time to go. They ran back through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears. As they reached the entrance, Jack's worst fears were confirmed. In the sky above the jungle, 3 dark ships were approaching. Jack clenched his teeth. They found us. Aura looked at him, waiting for a decision. Jack exhaled, then smirked. All right, let's make this interesting. He pulled out his communicator. Rusty, fire up the engines. We're leaving. Fast. Acknowledged. Engines warming up. Jack turned to Aura. You ready? Aura nodded, determination in her eyes. Jack grinned. Then let's give them a chase they'll never forget. They ran toward the ship as the enemy ships closed in, and Jack knew. This was only the beginning. Jack and Aura sprinted through the jungle, dodging between trees and leaping over thick roots. The sound of engines roaring above them sent a chill down Jack's spine. The enemy ships had found them. Above the treetops, 3 dark ships circled like predators, scanning the ground. A bright spotlight swept across the jungle, moving dangerously close to them. Jack gritted his teeth. They're fast. Aura glanced at him, her silver eyes sharp with determination. She held the holographic device tightly in her hand. Jack pressed his communicator. Rusty, we need those engines ready now. Engines at 80%. Estimated liftoff in 1 minute. Jack cursed under his breath. We don't have a minute. Suddenly, the ground shook. A blue energy beam struck a tree just a few meters away, exploding it into dust. Jack's eyes widened. They're firing at us now. Aura grabbed his wrist and pointed toward a rocky path leading uphill. Jack frowned. You want to go higher? We need to get to the ship. Aura shook her head and tapped the device. The map flickered, showing a small symbol on the hilltop. Jack understood. There was something up there, something important. He hesitated for only a second before nodding. All right, but we need to be fast. The secret on the hill. They raced up the hill, their legs burning from the effort. Behind them, the ships hovered lower, scanning the ground. The enemy hadn't spotted them yet, but it was only a matter of time. When they reached the top, Jack's breath caught in his throat. There, half buried under the dirt, was a small metallic structure. It looked ancient, covered in strange symbols. Aura ran to it and placed her hand on the surface. The metal hummed, and suddenly, a small control panel slid open. Jack stepped closer. What is this? Aura pressed a sequence of buttons, and a shockwave of energy pulsed outward. Jack stumbled back. What did you just do? Before Aura could answer, the jungle below them lit up. From the trees, hidden towers and defensive structures began to emerge. The ancient ruins had been asleep for centuries, and now they were waking up. Jack's eyes widened as energy shields shimmered into existence, covering the area around the rust hopper. Aura had activated something, a defensive system built by her people. And just in time. The battle begins. The enemy ships reacted instantly. One of them fired a powerful energy blast, aiming straight at their ship. But this time, the attack never reached. A massive energy shield blocked the shot, absorbing it like a ripple in water. Jack let out a breath. Oh, that is beautiful. The enemy ships changed tactics, diving lower to attack from different angles. Jack grabbed Aura's arm. Whatever you did, I think they're mad about it. We need to move. Aura nodded, and they ran back down toward the rust hopper, protected by the newly activated defenses. The escape plan. By the time they reached the ship, Rusty's voice echoed over the communicator. Engines at 100%, ready for takeoff. Jack didn't waste a second. He and Aura rushed inside, and the ship's ramp closed behind them. Jack jumped into the pilot's seat and flipped the switches. The rust hopper roared to life, lifting off the ground. The enemy ships chased them immediately, their engines flaring. Jack gripped the controls. All right, you want to play? Let's play. The chase. The rust hopper shot into the sky, twisting between the enemy ships. Jack pulled the throttle, dodging an incoming attack. A blast of energy shot past the cockpit, missing by inches. Rusty, give me some countermeasures. Deploying flares. Small metallic decoys burst from the ship's hull, confusing the enemy's tracking systems. One of the enemy ships fired. Boom. Instead of hitting Jack's ship, the blast struck one of their own decoys, sending an explosion into the air. Jack grinned. Works every time. Aura watched the battle unfold, then suddenly pointed at the holographic map. She pressed a button, and a new symbol blinked, a warp point just beyond the planet's atmosphere. Jack understood immediately. You're telling me we can jump out of here? Aura nodded. Jack smirked. Then let's do it. Breaking through. The rust hopper climbed higher, racing toward the escape point. The enemy ships weren't giving up. They accelerated, trying to block their exit. Jack gritted his teeth. Oh no, you don't. He flipped a switch. Thrusters, maximum power. The ship lurched forward, faster than before, breaking through the clouds and into the upper atmosphere. Jack glanced at the screen. The warp point was just ahead, but so were the enemy ships. They're gonna cut us off, Jack muttered. Aura pressed a button on the holographic device, and suddenly, the ancient defenses activated one last time. From the jungle below, a final pulse of energy shot into the sky, hitting one of the enemy ships directly. Boom! The ship spun out of control, colliding into the second one. The third ship barely dodged in time but was forced to pull back. Jack seized the moment. He punched the warp drive, and the rust hopper shot forward. Just as the warp gate opened, the ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving the enemy behind. A new beginning. Silence filled the cockpit. The rust hopper floated peacefully in the vast emptiness of space, far from danger. Jack exhaled slowly. That was close. Aura sat in the co-pilot's chair, calm but thoughtful. Jack turned to her. So, what now? Aura looked at him, then at the map device, which still showed several red blinking locations. Jack smirked. You're not done yet, are you? Aura shook her head. Jack leaned back, staring at the endless stars outside. Well, he said with a grin, I guess I'm not done either. The rust hopper turned toward the next destination, engines humming. Whatever secrets were left, whatever enemies still chased them, Jack and Aura would face them together. And this was just the beginning.